Hi, good morning everyone. I'm Emily Ross and I'm really pleased to be here with Jake Horowitz, who's the founder of Mike, a UN young leader and a WEF media leader.
How are you? I'm very excited to be here.
I'm doing really well.
Morning.
So glad to have you. And we're here
it's great to be in the mountains.
SDG Live studio in the mountains at the World Economic Forum annual meeting. And I guess the first question I have for you, Jake, is you're the founder of Mike, which is a media and news organization. What brings you to Davos at the WEF annual meeting, and what are you really trying to achieve while you're here?
Sure. Well, hi everybody. Thank you for having me. This is my second year here. So I started Mike, which is a media company that targets millennials. We're now the leading millennial media outlet in the US and across the world.
Right.
I am here to, as a media leader, so I'm here to really engage in important conversations at this very, very troubling moment that we live in across the world with newsmakers, with policymakers, with people in the corporate sector. And so it's been a really interesting week. You know, I've done a whole host of things, everything from interviews on Mike to moderating a few panels and conversations with folks across the NGO and corporate sector. It's a really great platform for us to be able to engage with thought leaders and important folks who play an important role in decision making in a very, sort of 2 or 3 day period where you can get a lot in. So.
Yeah. And actually, one thing that was launched earlier in the week is the Edelman Trust Barometer, which I think saw that trust across all 4 institutions is really low, including of the media. And we know that the media plays a really key role in keeping people informed. And I'm just curious, from your perspective of working with and trying to reach millennials, how should and can media reach them and engage them with accurate information and sort of get rid of all the false information that's been spreading around?
Well, I think it's a great question. And for folks who are watching, I'm sure you feel that same sense of dissatisfaction with the media. The trust barometer that you're referring to was really troubling for a lot of reasons, because trust in all institutions is at an all-time low, but in media it's tanked big time over the last year. I think we have a big problem in media, and it's on us as journalists and media leaders to step up and help to regain the trust of our audiences. For me, a big part of the problem is that media feels very partisan, and that it's either left or right, and you can't have nuanced conversations anymore, and you just speak to the audiences that already agree with your stories, which is part of the problem with building a media company on social media. Is it's a very polarized environment. A second problem is that folks have really chased audience and attention over building trust with their audience. At Mike, we think about our impact in terms of both who we're reaching and are we developing trust with our readers? And we measure that very, very, very carefully.
How do you measure that?
We measure it in a whole host of ways, both quantitative and qualitative. So, we take it very seriously. When readers read a Mike story, we'll actually present them with surveys at the bottom of that story where we ask them a series of questions. Do they trust the information that they received? Would they come back again? What did they like? What didn't they like? And those questions help to inform our programming. And I think that it's not something that you often see when you're just measuring views and clicks and how many people that you reached.
Oh, that's great. So one of the reasons that we're hosting SDG Live here is to raise the awareness of the Sustainable Development Goals that were adopted last year at the United Nations. And as a UN young leader, I'm just curious how you think we can reach youth most effectively to first inform them about the Sustainable Development Goals as a true kind of blueprint for action for the world for the next 15 years. But then more importantly, how do we actually get them to actively engage in implementing them?
Yeah, well, that's also a great question. I've been very fortunate to be around the UN network and be part of this very ambitious effort to tackle the world's leading challenges in the next few decades. I think the key is the SDG goals are intentionally broad so that, it covers the gamut. It covers everything from education to gender equality to inequality to a whole host of issues. And I think that's a good thing, because it means that you, as a young person, if you're working in a whole host of spaces as an activist to advocate on behalf of fellow citizens, then you are probably doing something to get towards the goals. I think that in order to inform our generation and really engage in a substantive way with these goals, we need to do a good job of storytelling and explaining what they are, why they matter, and importantly, across the platforms that young people are actually consuming information. We're living in a very different time where If you're 26 years old today, you're not picking up a physical New York Times.
Right.
You're engaging on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and Snapchat and watching video across Netflix and Hulu and Amazon. And these are important platforms to be building programming shows and thinking about how to get the message out there. So my advice would be to sort of think very, very carefully about communicating across the platforms where people our age are actually consuming news.
I have one last question.
Yeah.
People, when they're here at the World Economic Forum meeting, often have a kind of a Davos moment, a fun run-in or something. Have you had anything this week that's been notable?
Davos moment. You know, I think that I'm going to flip the question a little bit, which is I think that part of why I'm here is to really try to represent Mike's audience. And over the last year plus, what we've seen is young people take to the streets and advocate for everything from Black Lives Matter and racial equality to gender equality. You know, we're about to see a women's march in the United States on Saturday, on the day after the inauguration, which is going to be unprecedented in terms of the number of people who are going to come out, both millennial and otherwise. And then, you look at Standing Rock and Native American issues. Young people are engaged and they are excited to be on the front lines, to be activists, to be protesters. And so part of what I've tried to do here is bring that message to this group. I think this group is a really important group of some of the most important people in the world. However, it can be a bubble. And it can be, especially at this time when we're seeing the rise of populism and sort of challenge to the global elite, so to speak, it can be a silo where folks don't really hear what's happening on the ground and what millennials actually care about. And so what I've tried to do is, in all of my interactions with folks, bring that message, talk about the protester, talk about the Black Lives Matter activists, talk about the folks who are really leading the change. And so my most interesting conversations have been with trying to impart those stories on people here.
I love that. That's such a great way to end, and I really appreciate it, Jake.
Well, thank you. Thank you, and thank you for watching.
Thank you.